Hi, this is Michael Hoxton from HoxtonHealth.com. Today I'd like to talk about an exercise called a hanging leg raise. This is in request from a fellow colleague and friend, Chris Dillon, a practitioner from New Jersey, who had asked me to do a little video on it. So this is for Chris Dillon. Now the hanging leg raise, it's a very advanced lower abdominal exercise, and it's one of those exercises where I find most people actually do first when they're actually beginners. So they haven't really done the work to do it. So what they end up doing is doing a lot of compensatory work. And eventually some people are able to do it, but unknowingly they may be making themselves more prone for injury in the long term. Okay, so I'm talking more from a rehabilitation, corrective exercise viewpoint. So in the hanging leg raise, there's a couple of ways to do it. I generally recommend to start with the hips already flexed to about 90 degrees or so, or up to a point where the pelvis and lumbar spine start to move, okay? Or lumbar spine actually starts to flex, and then back off a little bit, and that'll be your starting position. And as you're hanging, you just lift the legs up higher than that until the pelvis posteriorly tilts and the lumbar spine flexes. So in this exercise, actually the lower abdomen are working as movers as compared to another function of the muscles, which is to stabilize. Now, sometimes people will say when you're doing the hanging leg raise that if you just move the hips and you don't lift up the pelvis, you're not working the abdominals or lower abdominals at all, and that's cheating and you're just doing a hip flexor exercise. Well, another viewpoint, that's a partial truth, because the other viewpoint is that although the hip flexors are the movers, it's the abdominals that are the stabilizers. Because if you think about it, when your arms are raised up and you're hanging, what does that do to the shoulder extensor called the latissimus dorsi, which covers a lot of ground? It goes from your shoulder, down your whole back, down to your pelvis. So with that with your arms overhead like this, it creates a lot of tension on that muscle, puts it on a stretch. So what does it do to the pelvis where it inserts? Well, through the thoracolumbar fascia, what it does, it has more of an extensor moment or an extension type of movement, so to speak. Not movement, but influence, where the lumbar spine is more extended or extending, and there's more bias towards an anterior pelvis tilt of the pelvis. So the abdominals have to counter that. Just from the hanging position, your abdominals are firing. Well, at least they should be. Most people, their lack of awareness and they're disconnected from their body, it may be a norm for most people not to feel their abdominals, or they just may be too over rectus abdominis dominant, and they're not too really connected with feeling their deeper abdominal wall, so to speak. Anyway, what's going on is that the abdominals have to counter that extensor force just from the hanging position, all right? So they're functioning already, they're stabilizing. Now, by having the hips flexed, you're isolating them more so that they're working more as movers, because they're moving the pelvis into posterior rotation and the lumbar spine into more flexion. It's a very small motion because a lot of people have very stiff lumbar spines, or their lumbar spines are already stuck in flexion, or they just lack lumbar extension. So that's a good way to start somebody when they could progress to a lower abdominal advanced exercise such as the hanging one. Now, if somebody has what they call a flat back or a decreased lumbar lordosis, which may provide somebody to be more prone for disc herniations or disc bulges or back injury, back pain, you might want to start them with their legs hanging. Now with their legs hanging, the hip flexors have a little bit more tension. And where the hip flexors attach, they have more of an influence on the pelvis of an anterior rotation. So that creates even more of a challenge with the legs hanging for the abdominal muscles to counter the force of the hip flexors in the front and of the latissimus dorsi in the back. Okay? So if you have a flat back, start with the legs down. Now another thing is when you do the exercise is to start with the knees bent, because with the legs straight, that creates a longer lever arm, which creates more of a challenge to the abdominal muscles. Okay? Now also, keep in mind when you bring the knees up, depending on the length of the hip extensors, the gluteals, they might be short and tight. So when you flex and you put them on stretch, that might create a pull on the pelvis, the posterior rotate, and then flex the lumbar spine. So bending the knees, even though it may not look like they're reaching 90 degrees, they may be already working their lower abdomen. Okay, so just keep these things in mind. But just in general, for most people, to start the isolated function of the lower abdominals as movers, start with the legs, the hips already flexed. If that's not an issue, if somebody has a flat back, or decreased lumbar lordosis, or they want to work more of the integrated function of the hip flexors and the lower abdominals, where there's a stabilizing end mover, a little bit of everything worked all together, then start with the legs down, okay? And then key thing is, watch out for the sway, the momentum, okay? When there's a lot of sway, they call it cheating, but it's not really cheating, it's just cheating. It's just compensating, so to speak. And you're not really achieving the areas that you want to work, which is the lower abdomen in integration and or isolation of the hip flexors over here. Okay, so I'm just going to demonstrate the progression, or I'm just going to demonstrate first with the legs up, and then I'll demonstrate with straight legs, and I'll go from there. Okay, so the starting is, you get in the bar, okay, watch your head position, don't let your head jut forward or behind you, keep it in line with the rest of the body, alright? And I like to add the breathing with this, so I like to exhale as I come up, inhale as the legs go down, okay? My legs are up right before they start, the lumbar spine starts to flex. Then I start from here, and then I inhale, and I exhale. Okay? So that's the isolated version. It's very subtle, very small motion. Okay? Now, you could do it with the legs hanging. Okay? Okay? With the knees bent. And then you can progress with the legs straight. Okay, so it's an excellent exercise, but you gotta work your way up to it. And with any advanced exercise, it would be helpful to have an advanced understanding of what's actually going on function-wise with the body, the anatomy of it. So that's all I want to say today about the hanging leg raise. Until the next time, Hoxton Health, I'm Michael Hoxton at hoxtonhealth.com. Have a wonderful day.